all the largest flying boats in history. Dornier DOX. At the time of its production, the Dornier DOX was the largest, heaviest, and most powerful flying boat in the world. Designed by Claude Dornier and completed in 1929, the DOX made its first flight on July 12th that same year, marking the dawn of large-capacity air travel. It was powered by 12 engines mounted in 6 nacelles above the wing, and weighed more than 31 tons, equal to the mass of 3.5 elephants. The DOX had 3 decks in its hull, the upper deck housing the pilots, a crew of 14, and engine and navigation controls, the lower deck holding its 5,110 gallons of fuel, and the middle deck, which was able to accommodate 70 passengers with incredible luxuries like sleeping berths, a bar, dining rooms, and lavatories. During a test flight, it carried as many as 170 people, and was operated by Germany's national airline Lufthansa until 1933, when a crash landing broke off the aircraft's tail. Only 3 DOXs were ever produced, and they never enjoyed commercial success. Latico Air 521. Another large transatlantic passenger aircraft, the Latico Air 521 was a French 6-engined flying boat that made its first flight on January 10, 1935 to mark the 300th year of French rule in the Americas. It reached Pensacola, Florida, but was caught in a deadly hurricane and capsized, and had to be sent back to France by boat to be rebuilt. The all-metal aircraft had a large shoulder wing that was connected to sponsons on both sides, which provided stability on the water. It could carry 30 passengers on transatlantic flights. In November 1937, it set a seaplane record for distance when it flew 3,600 miles, or about 1.5 times the length of the Mississippi River, in 34 hours and 37 minutes. Martin JRM Mars. In 1938, the United States Navy contracted the Glenn L. Martin Company to build an overwater patrol bomber, which would become the Navy's largest flying boat. The Martin Mars had 4 propeller engines, a deep boat-like hull, twin vertical tail fins, and a 200-foot wingspan. By 1942, the aircraft had been fully tested, but the war had shifted and the Navy no longer had a need for a slow patrol bomber. It was converted to a transport aircraft to be used mainly on Pacific routes between California and Hawaii. The Mars ferried cargo as well as people, and set a world passenger load record on March 4, 1949, when it carried 269 people from San Diego to Alameda, California. After being retired from the U.S. Navy in 1956, the JRM Mars underwent another career change, and 4 aircraft were converted into firefighting water bombers by a consortium of Canadian forest companies. Each aircraft can drop 60,000 pounds of fire-retardant foam every 15 minutes to cover areas up to 4 acres at a time. The planes refill their 7,200-gallon tanks while skimming the water with 2 underbelly scoops, and can take on over a ton of water per second. Latico Air 631. The Latico Air 631, a descendant of the 521, was ordered in 1938 by the French Civil Aviation Authority to be another transatlantic airliner. Due to the outbreak of World War II, construction of the aircraft was halted and was not resumed until the signing of the Franco-German armistice in 1940. The 631 made its first flight in 1942, was subsequently confiscated by the Germans and destroyed, but the French continued to manufacture them in secret. It was 142 feet long, with a wingspan of 188 feet, was powered by 6 propeller engines, and could fly at a maximum speed of 245 miles per hour. On August 2, 1948, an Air France 631 was infamously lost at sea over the Atlantic Ocean when it caught fire with 40 passengers and 12 crew members aboard. At the time, it was the deadliest accident suffered by this type of aircraft, and Air France withdrew it from service following the incident. Sud-Est SE-200 Amphitrite. Before the nationalization of the French aircraft industry, French aircraft manufacturer Sud-Est built a large 6-engine flying boat airliner in the late 1930s named the SE-200 Amphitrite. It featured a high-set cantilever monoplane wing and twin tails, was 131 feet long and 32 feet tall, or about the height of 2 giraffes. It was designed to accommodate 40 passengers, a crew of 8, and 2 pilots. Much like the Latico Air 631, construction of the SE-200 was abandoned after the outbreak of World War II, picked up again after the fall of France, but the aircraft was destroyed in an air raid by the Germans in 1944. After being salvaged and repaired, the SE-200 was able to make its first flight on April 2, 1946, but was eventually scrapped after a hard landing during a test in 1949. Tupolev AN-T-22. The enormous Tupolev AN-T-22 was a Soviet flying boat that had 2 hulls and was powered by 6 engines in 3 nacelles mounted over the wing. Built in 1934, it was designed mainly as a reconnaissance aircraft to explore remote offshore areas, carry out bombing missions in heavily fortified enemy territory, and transport bulky cargo such as small submarines or semi-submersible torpedo boats. On December 8, 1936, it set a world record for carrying capacity among seaplanes when it lifted 10 tons of cargo to a height of 6,371 feet and was capable of carrying loads over 14 tons, or the weight of about 8 cars. Blohm & Voss BV-238. The Blohm & Voss BV-238 was a mammoth German flying boat built during World War II and the largest aircraft produced by any of the Axis powers during that time. Weighing in at over 60 tons, or the weight of 100 grand pianos, it was also the heaviest aircraft ever flown when it took its first flight in April 1944. It was powered by a series of 6 V-12 piston engines mounted on a high monoplane wing. It was capable of transporting and delivering soldiers and vehicles for amphibious assault, and there were even rumors that Adolf Hitler could use it to escape to South America. Only one aircraft was ever completed, and it was sunk by Allied fighter planes in 1945 while it lay docked at a seaplane base on Schalsee Lake in Germany. Hughes H-4 Hercules. The largest flying boat ever built was the 400,000-pound behemoth, the Hughes H-4 Hercules, nicknamed Spruce Goose for its wooden construction. Designed and built by the Hughes Aircraft Company between 1942 and 1947, it has the largest wingspan of any aircraft in history. It was made almost entirely out of birchwood, contrary to its nickname, to minimize the craft's total weight and to avoid using critical wartime materials like aluminum. The H-4 had a single hull, 8 radial engines, was over 5 stories tall, had a wingspan almost as long as a football field, and was designed to carry 750 fully equipped troops or 2 Sherman tanks over long distances. By 1947, the H-4 had cost the U.S. government a whopping $22 million and an additional $18 million of Howard Hughes' own money. And Hughes was even called to testify before the Senate War Investigating Committee over the controversial use of government funds for the aircraft. A few months later, on November 2, 1947, Hughes and a crew of 35 pilots, engineers, and invited guests flew the Spruce Goose for the first and only time, where it coasted 33 feet above the surface of Long Beach Harbor for less than 1 minute before landing. Saunders Roe SR-45 Princess. Built by British manufacturer Saunders Roe between 1946 and 1952, the SR-45 Princess was the largest all-metal flying boat ever constructed. The design incorporated several brand new technologies for the time, including a pressurized cabin, all hydraulic controls, and turboprop power. The Princess's 6 propellers were powered by 10 engines, and the fuselage contained 2 passenger decks that could accommodate 105 passengers with all the luxuries of an ocean liner. 3 Princesses were built, but only one ever flew. The original prototype made its first test flight on August 22, 1952, and eventually clocked about 100 hours of flight time in 46 total tests. In 1958, the United States Air Force stepped in to convert the 3 Princesses into nuclear-powered bombers, but those plans were eventually abandoned, leaving the Princess to become a forgotten chapter in Britain's imperial past. Bereave A-40 Albatross. A more modern variant of the flying boat is the Bereave A-40 Albatross, the largest amphibious aircraft in the world, which was developed by Bereave Aircraft Company in the mid-1980s. The Russian A-40 was devised primarily as an anti-submarine warplane, but was also capable of reconnaissance and search and rescue missions, and could take off and land from both water-based and traditional runways. The A-40's first test flight occurred on December 8, 1986, when the craft ran out of runway during a high-speed taxiing test and was forced to go airborne. With a maximum speed of 500 miles per hour and a range of 3,400 miles, or about the distance from Moscow to Jerusalem and back, the A-40 was capable of delivering weapons such as anti-ship missiles, torpedoes, depth charges, and naval mines. Since 1989, the A-40 has set 148 world records. Caproni CA-60 Novaplano. This 9-winged flying boat prototype was designed by Italian aviation pioneer Gianni Caproni and was known for its 3 massive sets of wings mounted on top of the craft's hull. Construction of the Novaplano, also known as the Capronissimo, began in 1919, and it was intended to become a 100-passenger transatlantic airliner, which was considered to be a rather outlandish idea at the time. It had 8 V-12 engines and a wing area of over 8,000 square feet, equivalent to the size of 3 tennis courts. The aircraft was tested twice and tragically crashed on March 4, 1921. The CA-60 was such an extraordinary aircraft that Japanese director Hayao Miyazaki featured it and its creator in the 2013 animated film The Wind Rises.